If they're a B2B marketer, if they've got a B2B business, I think you think in terms of what's the uncommon thinking, the language that you use. How can I be non-traditional in whatever it is, whatever widget, whatever service I deliver? How could I become a discovery platform? How could I take all of these innovative things? Because here's exactly what happens. People have been doing things the same way for decades, and they only know what they know. And if their executive team, maybe it's one or two people, and they sit around and all they talk about is just the few things, or moving some things around, but they really at the core are doing the same thing they've always done. I think you've got to get in there and really, like a bull in a china shop, you got to break things down. You got to start thinking, what would Mod Pizza do? What would Starbucks do? What would Zappos do? What would Amazon do? What would Bookstore PR do? Like, what are some crazy innovative companies doing that we can't do exactly that? We don't sell the same product. We're not in the same business. But man, could I learn from them? Could I learn from banking or insurance or funeral directors? What can I learn from all of these businesses that I could break the mold and do it differently for me? That's uncommon thinking.
Welcome to the B2B Digital Marketer Podcast, a podcast helping you to end your struggle with digital marketing, helping you to pave a new and better path to target and capture your ideal customer. Each week, we teach you how insiders and experts debunk the dreary and become engines of innovation. Now, here's your host, Jim Rembach.
Okay, B2B DM gang. Today I'm excited because I'm going to get the opportunity to share some insights that, of course, are going to be delivered by Jim Knight, who I have on the show with me, about uncommon thinking for B2B authors. Jim Knight, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jim. Always a pleasure to be with you, man. Thank you.
Now, you and we've already had a great off-mic discussion.
We have, yep.
Yes, and this is going to be great topics that we're going to hit, because I think uncommon thinking is what we have to do right now in a whole multitude of different ways. But before we get into, authoring and B2B authoring and marketing and buzz and branding and sales and all of that, if you could tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I am a keynote speaker. That's what I do professionally. So I speak in front of audiences for profit. I'll do some philanthropic stuff from time to time. I'm also an author. We'll get into the book marketing stuff, which I now claim. But, I started off as a musician. I do have my degree in music performance and education. I was a middle school teacher for 6 years, but really kind of my claim to fame is I was 21 years at Hard Rock International and ran training and development for those guys and opened up properties, cafes, hotels, casinos around the world. I left about a decade ago to do exactly what I'm doing right now, and I'm absolutely loving it. This is the last stop for me. I will probably do what I'm doing right now the rest of my life.
Well, and we'll get into that. So, why you actually feel that way, right? And so for us, I think it's good to kind of be able to educate, help people understand, and build, a pathway to what, uncommon thinking and how that can actually add value. And I think it's probably best to start out when you think about the B2B space is what are some of the differences between authors, in regards to that, what we had talked about, keynoters and who else, who wouldn't be in that space?
Yeah, so I think maybe that uncommon thinking is perfect. I mean, I'm a fan of, Marcus Buckingham sort of coined this when he was at the Gallup organization, and he actually wrote his first book, First Break All the Rules. I am firmly a guy who believes, if it isn't broke, break it. You can always make it better. I hate people that just become apathetic. They become lethargic. They sit back and go, look how awesome we are. You're only awesome until you're not. And somebody's going to come along and do the same thing you're doing for a cheaper price. All of a sudden, I can point to a date on the calendar when you get out of business. So I said, I'm going to be like this in everything I do. My mind's always been like that since I've been an adult. So I'm, 30, 35 years later. I think now in the space that I play in the bookmarking world, or even when I was an author, and part of this had to deal with my business partner and I writing our own books, not only having these published, our first ones were self-published, but we had to go through a hybrid publisher. We didn't have to, we wanted to. But I still wanted my own sort of non-traditional approach. So that uncommon thinking, I think, is perfect because there is a difference between traditional marketing and non-traditional. And so if we use the book industry as an example, The traditional would be, how can I get on television? How can I get on radio? How can I get, to be on the #1 New York Times bestseller list? How can I get to where I'm going to be in a magazine write-up? There's some things, there's some pathways that you could do with that. They're very expensive. And unless you're really connected or you've written multiple books, 5, 6 books, or you're a big time celebrity, those just aren't sitting there on the vine waiting for you to pick them off. You've got to do something a little bit different. So for us, we look for different things, like how can we play in the Instagram community? How can we play in TikTok community? How can I get you seamlessly onto a lot of podcasts, or at least pitch you out there so that you have a really good likely approach versus you just going on the web and doing it all on your own, or just relying on some PR company where you're going to spend a lot of money, by the way, with no guarantees. At least my business partner and I created something that where we've got probably a third the cost. We're a low cost provider, but our entire company is predicated on guarantee. So I'll stop there for a second. But I think when you say uncommon thinking, it's the difference between traditional, non-traditional. I will go non-traditional all day long because we have a lot of self-published authors and hybrid who can't afford to do the old school traditional. It just doesn't work for them.
Well, and okay, so and let's now connect this to many of our listeners on the B2B digital marketers. Yes. That I'm not a keynoter, professional keynoter. You mentioned, and the word you used was like freenoter. What is a freenoter?
Yeah, I didn't create the word, that's for sure. And I have some really good friends that have an awesome podcast called The Freenoter, which basically these are people who don't take any money for speaking, but the goal is to get eyeballs, to get some interest, to get yourself to be a catalyst in their head to go, I love what they're saying. I'm going to go check out their product or their service or whatever it is. So freenoters actually have something else that they do. They're a consultant. They're a thought leader in their particular industry. They have some physical product that they sell. They might have an e-learning course, some sort of ongoing development. And we, in our own company, really push people through the book marketing that we do because of that reason. We never really try and focus on book sales, at least in this world. But there are probably a lot of people that are listening right now in your audience that maybe they'll never be able to be a keynoter where they make a lot of money like you see a lot of speakers do right now, but they'll still go out there. They're still the same quality. They still have some awesome edutainment, but they're not interested in making money there. They're interested in growing their brand elsewhere. So we talk to a lot of authors and we tell them flat out, if book sales is what you're measuring, if that's your metric, if that's your goal, 1, you're going to be disappointed regardless of who you go with. And 2, we're probably the wrong company for you. What we will do is create a lot of buzz to put eyeballs, to get some marketing, to get a lot of ginned up excitement about you personally and all the other stuff that you bring to the party. So that's what I would say. Freenoters, keynoters, they're both awesome, but a freenoter is really about, I don't care about that. I just want to get you into the candy store because I know you're going to buy with all the other stuff.
Right. I mean, it's that credibility thing that everybody talks about. And it's kind of like that badge, regardless of what's between the covers, is like, oh, you wrote a book.
It's so wild that you have to think like that, but it's the truth, Jim. I think just by sheer writing the book, you gain instant credibility. Even if the book is crap, honestly, the fact that you wrote it, all of a sudden your fees go up if that's what you're doing professionally. People will pay you more money. But as a freenoter, or just in general, the fact that you want to write a book, as long as you've got somewhere else for them to go and check out, it immediately gives you something where people go, ooh, I want to pay attention to them a little bit more. That's not the only reason to do it. I wish there were a lot of authors who didn't take that approach, but there are some literally that will go out and do it. A lot of people, they have something to say. They just want a louder voice in the world. That's me. I mean, I love what I do for a living and I could just rely on that. But the fact that I can extend the reach of my own influence and impact, that's the whole reason I wrote the book, that it lasts longer. There's more stops on the tour, if you will, than just seeing the live event one time.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the whole, how to, build a relationship and wanting people to come back for more is that you do pay attention to what's in between the covers, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so then we got the freenoters and keynoters, and we've got book sales versus buzz media and brand,
yes.
and also leading to future sales, and part of our uncommon theme, as well as our uncommon, impact that we can have as a result of writing this book. You and I talked about, what's in the book, staying in the book, and then also pulling people outside of the book. And then with what you're doing with your new business, Bookie Call, I think it would be really appropriate for us to give people some insight into, how do you go from just being a publisher to being, something that's actually going to be of greater value. And what I mean of value is, again, we're not talking about book sales. We're talking about that people are going to be more interested and engaged in you, and therefore you're going to get some benefit from it.
Yeah. So first off, I would say our first company, the one that is helping specifically authors and publishers, that one is Bookstar PR. I mean, there's a whole, the focus there is being a low-cost provider, but predicated on guarantees, which again, you do not hear in the PR and marketing world. We're cheaper than just about everybody else, but we're doing some of that uncommon thinking. Like you said, we're taking non-traditional marketing approaches. That's one company and for that one audience, probably more for your audience. Bookie Call will be for everybody, because what we have found is, and I was shocked to hear this number, that the average American, at least in the US, we know these metrics, will buy 12 books a year. And I go 12 books a year. That seems super high, but there are crazy voracious readers that are just moving through 1 to 2 books a week. It's not a problem for them. And so they're making up for all the other people that I know that aren't buying a lot of books. So Bookie Call was really about helping people as much as we possibly could to help discover their next read. So in creating really a book discovery platform, if you personally, Jim, were looking for a book to read, where would you go? Where would you start?
Well, for me, it's Amazon, right? That's where many of people that I know are going to.
That's right. And Amazon owns 85% of the market. And actually, our businesses are also predicated on trying to help out the mom and pop, the small businesses. We belong to the Independent Bookstore Association. There's nothing wrong with Amazon, but there's hundreds of millions of books in there. They will download or upload, in their case, in their business every single day, more than we'll have ever in our curated library, because we're only going to have 5,000 active at any given time. So you have 160,000% chance better of matching up to a book that we can recommend to you based off of how you fill out your profile than you would by going to Amazon. But going back to your point, most people will go to Amazon, they'll do a search. Maybe they've heard about an author or title, but honestly, it's a crapshoot. And sometimes if you look down the bottom, you've already bought a previous book. They go, based off of that, we think you might like these types of things. Everybody does that on Amazon. It's just like Netflix. You start to pick different shows and they think because you'd like that, here's what we would recommend. Ironically, a lot of people, when they're seeking a new band, a new TV show or series to watch, and even books, they go onto Facebook and they go, hey, I'm looking for my next book. They get recommendations from their friends that they trust and admire and respect. We want to become that platform. And so if you'll indulge me for a second, basically what you're doing is when you download the app, Bookie Call, you basically are creating a profile because it's disguised as a dating app. So there's 2 things that happen. You fill out a profile just like you would if you were going to Tinder or Grindr or Match or eHarmony or Bumble or any of these other apps. Based off of what you fill out, you've created your own profile. Do you like fiction, nonfiction? Here's 10 categories in each. Here's what you like and don't like. And you have a sliding scale. So already our proprietary algorithm is smart enough to say, based off of what your profile is, we think you like these. And we start recommending books to you. And every time you swipe right on one to say, I like this, or swipe left and say, never again, I'm not interested because of the theme or the author or gut feeling or whatever, that one goes into a black hole, but the algorithm gets smarter and smarter. So as we add more books in there, you've got a pretty good chance of actually matching up. But here's the second part. All of the questions that we ask of the book, because we have professional writers that are bringing the books to life. They've created a personality for these books. Based off of these questions, what are your most attractive traits? Who would swipe right on you? Who would voice you in your audio version? What would we eat or drink on our first date? Like, these are questions that the psychology, the proven methods of a dating app have already done. When they've already done that work, we're taking it and making it a book dating platform. So I know that's a long answer to your question, but I think people in your audience, they don't have to be writers or publishers or maybe even just crazy readers. But if they're looking for a great book, there's some edutainment in just going through the app itself and having an AI conversation with the book to go, am I interested in taking that book on a date, print, audio, or digital, an ebook version?
Well, I think that's important because that's part of the uncommon thinking. I mean, it's like using AI in a creative way.
Yep.
It is personalizing.
Totally.
I mean, it's in a multitude of different ways. It's something that even when you started talking about some of the things that you're doing, which I think is quite interesting, like you talked about actually doing a late night bookie call. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, just like you would imagine, 2 times a week, you get a bookie call. And so we will have a push notification that will go out if you've downloaded the app. And at some point at night, 7, 8 o'clock at night, you're going to get a message that says you up. And from that, you can check it out. And we will offer you 3 books based off of your profile. The AI, the algorithm has already been created. We know these are 3 books that fit within what you said. Now, it might not be 100%, but we're going to be pretty close that it'd be something that you like. Eventually, these will be flash sales. You can take advantage of the bookie call within an hour. Maybe you get 50% off, or maybe it's a 99-cent download, audiobook. These are types of things that already exist, but we put it into this ecosystem. So there's that. We will wind up doing book speed dating events. So imagine going to your local book store, one that you want to support, but you could do it at a Books A Million or Barnes and Noble or something like that. You go in and we'll take over. We'll have this curated group of books that will show up, and all these high tops will be in there. And I guess if a lot of people know what a speed date is, you would go in, you talk to somebody for a certain amount of time, they blow the whistle, and you rotate and go to the next table. Same concept, but now it'll be a stack of books. You've got the app downloaded. You can actually listen to an audio clip before you actually leave that table to go to the next one. You can swipe right, grab a book, it automatically buys it into your your e-commerce. So just having the event itself would be fun. So these are the types of things, uncommon thinking, the non-traditional approach to really get you to what is my next great read. All the great ones are still out there, even though people don't think they are. They just can't find them. They can't mine for them. They don't want to just do it through Amazon or Goodreads, which is a big monster place where a lot of people go. It's just not a great, experience, I think, for people looking for their next book. And by the way, you talk about uncommon thinking. Remember, this is a discovery platform. You can take it and put it into anything. You can discover podcasts or speakers or movies or my next favorite band or whatever it is. We could take the same concept and build that around just about any industry, whatever the product is. We just happen to start with books because that's what we know. That's what we do.
Well, and so did Amazon, right?
Yes, exactly. Well, that's how they started. I mean, it was a book. It was an online book platform, basically. And now, anything you want, you can get it tomorrow delivered.
That's crazy. Okay,
yeah, I'd like to become the next Amazon chip if that's where you were going. That would be awesome.
Well, you might get in a little gray area with the whole, bookie call.
Maybe, but you know what? When they come and buy us, and they can call it anything they want.
That's right. Well, and you can have other late night treats.
Yes.
So, okay. Yeah. So I think it's really important too, though, that, everybody, a lot of people are trying to shoot for that Amazon bestseller list. To me, this is even thinking beyond that, right? So, okay, that'll give me something, but really the way I see people doing that, let's say there's some gray area ways on being able to become, an Amazon bestseller. But that doesn't, but it doesn't necessarily translate, into the engagement component, which I think is so compelling for what, you're offering with Bookie Call.
Yeah. But along those lines, I think, I don't want to mess up your question.
No, go ahead.
Here's a thought. I mentioned earlier, there are people, if you want to be, let's say, on a New York Times bestseller list, there are companies, there are people that will take your $100,000 to $150,000 and they guarantee that you'll get on that list. But they populate out to everybody. They scrape lists. There's a lot of things they do to gin up so many people that will either purchase the book or at least download something that you're doing enough that it warrants that you can get on that list. I just know there's a lot of people in my world, they're not going to have the money to do that, even though that is guaranteed in a lot of those businesses. They will give you the money back, but hardly any of them ever do because they'll hit the list. But being a number one bestseller on Amazon, I don't want to say it's easy. It's just there are some things you can do. You can do some low-hanging fruit. There's a lot of marketing initiatives that you can do. I would say half of our authors in our book marketing company, Bookstar PR, have reached that. I put my own book. I just had a new book that came out in May called Leadership That Rocks. I reached number one on Amazon. Now, it was certain day that we were doing it. It was in this topic, but a leadership book on Amazon to reach number one is massively hard to do. So, there's work that goes into it. There's money that would have been in a campaign that we offer, but you're likely to get there if you put a little bit of some focus and time and energy and rigor into the thing. But some of these other lists, if you're chasing lists, if you're trying to do book sales, people are going to be highly disappointed. They just are. It's so rare. It's a unicorn when that happens.
Okay. And what you just laid out there is kind of the part that I want to bring forth is that, and I've had this discussion with many because, having two podcasts, I mean, there's, literally hundreds of authors that I've interviewed over the past several years. Yeah. And all of them will sit there and tell you, and I'm sure you just basically kind of said it yourself, is that writing the book, can be seen when you look at the entire process, the easy part of it.
Yeah.
Especially if you're wanting to make an impact, you want to build a brand and you wanted to sell other things. I mean, is that, okay, it's the book writing and then it's the marketing and promotion and all of those things. That's a much bigger part of it.
It is. And actually, we've sent some people your way. We create basically a podcast e-newsletter that is just really generic, but all it does is prop up one singular author and their book. And, we're trying to highlight the book. We love for them to get some sales out of it. But here's what happens. And I have to explain this sometimes to the author because the podcasters already know this. These authors are not, I think I shared this maybe before we started talking today. They're not somebody who writes a book in their basement and that's all that they do. They hopefully do have other things like we've talked about in their world. I would venture to say that maybe one or two author clients that we've had, maybe they don't make the best podcast guests, but the majority of them have a lot of cool stuff going on. And so it does become more about the author. You will definitely talk about some of these other things that are going on in their life. You don't sit there and have the podcast solely about the book only. So as long as I can get podcast, hosts to understand that, I put it out there. And quite honestly, I would say the majority that we have, if they're not a marketing or a B2B author, there's no interest to you. It might be somebody else. Maybe that's what they're focused on. Although everything we do is nonfiction, but there are going to be some that are a perfect sweet spot for you, and it wouldn't be perfect for someone else. So we do a lot of pitching, but as you know, Jim, there are so many podcasts out there, and now people don't need a lot of help, honestly, getting guests. The majority know some pretty good people. You probably have a backfill. You have a lineup of people just waiting to get on the show. If you're worth your weight in salt and actually delivering a great quality podcast, it gets harder and harder these days with over 2.5 million podcast shows out there. So I have to focus on the book a little bit, but I also got to prop up the author because I need the show host to think a little bit beyond that book title doesn't really look interesting to me. But what? They used to do this. They run that. They've got this angle. They've got a philanthropic charitable component, like all of the stuff, the totality of the author makes sense to be on the show or not. So that's uncommon thinking. You've got to go down paths like that versus going, here's another author for you. People, all that does is go into the spam folder.
I think that's a very important discussion to have because I mean, for me, as many authors as I've had and interviews I've had, I've also had discussions with people who talk about, wanting to write a book, needing to write a book, yes, and all of that. And I mean, some of the things that you just said is going back to that. Well, that's the easy part. It's all of these other elements. And it used to be, I mean, when I started podcasting, 7-8 years ago, that, it was you work through your network and then you start, basically going and inviting people to the show. I don't do that anymore.
No.
I mean, for me, I'm, and this is not meant to boast in any way, but just kind of,
you're allowed.
I'm old. I've lost it. You still got it.
How do you know mine's not a wig? I could just yes.
I need that. Send it my way. Is that, I spend a significant amount of time just sorting through the requests. It's, and to me, and there's some people that, I feel bad about that I have not responded to that probably would make a very good, interview, but I just can't get to them all.
Yeah. But you don't want authors on your show. You want compelling people. You want the interview compelling. So if they've got great advice to give to people, their background is unbelievable. They happen to have written a book. If you can pitch it that way, if people can think in terms, they're going to have a much better chance of them actually getting onto the show or at least getting a second look. If all I hear is just author, that's not my jam, then people are just going to move on. So hopefully we've done some things differently. We don't hang our hat on podcasts. We just look at the totality of everything. We play in the Instagram world, like I talked about. We're starting to do more with the TikTok community. We think about the things we do from a global press release and sometimes getting picked up by hundreds and hundreds of different media outlets. again, some of these things you'd spend a lot of money and a lot of energy trying to get on a TV show, a radio show, a magazine spot. Again, those days are just a little bit different.
Well, that's why the uncommon thinking is so vital, is that, hey, I want to be associated if I'm going to put any effort and investment into the uncommon. And I've I've received that type of feedback in a couple different ways. I work with a lot of sales organizations and do a lot of lead generation work. And somebody said, I'm looking for different.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So in looking for different, which is so, that's the uncommon. Got to find different in order for us to be able to stand out and make the difference and have the impact. You had mentioned something to me that seems very uncommon, is that, tell me a little bit about dating a book. What does that mean?
Yeah. So again, I think people that have been through the ringer of trying to find their soulmate, some people are very lucky and others it's a big struggle. And so I think in today's world, there are so many people. There are hundreds of millions of people now that are in, these book dating sites. And so I think the way that you fill out a profile, the way that you're looking for somebody else, the way that you put in your own individual filters, it's actually made the experience for many, many people perfect, because like myself, I'm not going to go out and party. I'm a little bit older now where I'm not going to go and do that scene. Maybe I'll meet somebody in my day job, but I don't have a day job. I'm an entrepreneur. I stay at home. I travel for a living. I'm not really meeting anybody at church. How the heck am I supposed to meet anybody? So, I think online dating has been perfect for people. And there are soulmates that will swear they met their husband, their wife. There's no way they would have ever met them if they hadn't gone through that process. So you use that and go, there's proven methods, there's infrastructure there's the psychology that comes with that. And so there are so many companies that have created that same mindset all in that world. Could we take that? Could we take that psychology of book dating, regular dating of humans, and could we put that where you could bring a book to life? Could we make people so interested in a book that you'd want to date that book? Because most of the time, the idea is you never really own a book. And if you ever hand a book out, it's, you don't ask for that book back. You have a book and you give those books away. Could I date a book? Could I find my next great read for a short period of time? And so do you want to meet that book physically, digitally, or audio? We obviously you can go and buy those, and we've got some strategic partners we could send people, but it is about our writers, the way that they, through these 9-10 questions that are asked, that hundreds of millions of people already know, they're already familiar with on an online dating site. Could we do that for a book that then if you swipe right, you're in an AI conversation? There are some that are pre-organized, we've already got it set up, but basically based off of how you're answering, it gets you closer and closer to find exactly what you want. So
okay, and so then been fun for us. And one thing I think you have to talk about, because to me it was very intriguing, is that you had mentioned we're actually going to be interviewing a book. How do you interview a book?
So again, so we have a podcast. It'll be coming out pretty soon that again will come out once or twice a week. And it is going to be an audio version of some of the profiles we've created. So if our authors have already created an answer for these 9 questions, the podcast, the audio version, will be Boo. Boo is our character. It's our mascot for Bookie Call. He's got a bowler hat and a monocle and a mustache, and he will do the interviewing. So there's Boo, this person that does a voiceover, asking those same exact 9 questions. And then we have voiceover talent, male or female, based off of the book. They're answering exactly like the writers already wrote. So in effect, by just listening to that podcast, and all these are going to be under 10 minutes because that's how fast you can go through those 9 questions, you will get a pretty good feel whether this is a book that'll be exciting for you or not. It is extremely edutaining. We highly expect, now that we've just launched, there will be a lot of people that will spend more time on the app literally looking at the profiles because they're so fun, so intriguing, versus just buying the books. We want them to buy the books. That would be great. But at the end of the day, just spending time, whether in an audio version and listening, and not every book will have that audio caption, is going to be pretty interesting for us.
Okay, now you've mentioned edutaining a few times.
Yes.
So if I started looking at, your business model, your creative thinking process, and your innovation process, how are you able to? You have to, I think, and this is where I'm going. As far as I would have to think that you're somehow needing to score the edutainment factor. How are you doing that?
Well, I don't know if there's a metric on there. I think you can certainly, I know that there are people that look at how much time people spend on an app. There's a metric for that. And so the longer that you can get them to stay there, that will attract more people. They're going to talk about it. And ultimately, whatever it is you're selling in our world, we want them to go and buy books to our strategic partners. They will go to bookshop.org, for the physical book. They will go to Libro, which is perfect for audio and digital books, versus wherever they would have normally bought it. If we can get them into a speed dating event, there's a metric there that says how many people can we get to show up, how many books are sold at an actual physical event when we send these out to, 1,500 independent bookstores. So the edutainment factor, I'm not sure there's a measurement for that, but we can look at all the individual ones. How much money are people going to spend when they come to the app? How many downloads do we have? Ultimately, how many users? Because now you can start selling advertising space. For publishers and authors, there's a variety of ways that you can play. Just by getting your book in the library, there's a cost. There's a fee for that. Do you want to be book of the day? There's a fee for that. Do you want to be podcast of the day? There's a fee for that. There's the top 5. When people open up the app for the first time, there are 5 books that are recommended. Do you want one of those slots? There's a fee for that. Do you want a Bookie Call takeover? That's everything. Podcast, book, all of our social media, there's money for that. So between affiliate money, which is perfect, affiliate marketing, that's basically, you can think of our company as that. But all of these publishers who maybe they've got thousands, I'll use one company that published 5,000 books last year, 5,000 books. There are certainly some that did not get a fair shake during the pandemic. Maybe for whatever reason, the marketing efforts didn't work. Maybe they know for a fact they've got these 10, 15 authors that are awesome, but nobody bought the book. Could we now take those and show them a little bit more love and give them another opportunity, because they're going to have all of these users and we're going to create a profile for them without their permission? We're just going to go and do it as basically a review that says, here's how awesome the book is, and you can read it. There are books on ping pong and the royal family and, stuff that I would never have read on my own. I'm a nonfiction guy and I'm not sure I want to know about the difference between table tennis and ping pong, but I look at this profile and I go, I've got to read that book now. It's amazing to me. Now, there is the chance that somebody sees that profile, buys the book, and they go, yeah, it wasn't my cup of tea, but it wouldn't have even been recommended to you based off of, your profile in the first place and other books that you purchased along the way. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun with it. But the long answer, or the short answer at this point to your question, is I'm not sure we're measuring edutainment. This is how I've lived my life. My personal branding is really pulling the levers of rock and roll and education as a middle school teacher, and hospitality, because I spent 30 years in food and beverage. Can I take all of that? Can I use the spirit of rock and roll? Can I dunk people in that? And oh, by the way, they walk out of the room or finish reading the book going, that was an awesome use of my time. I got really good meaty takeaways to make my business or my life better. And oh, by the way, there were a few yucks along the way. I was laughing and it was cool and it was the soundtrack of my life. My personal branding and my partner, Brant Menswar, he also has had that same sort of trajectory. And together in these companies, we always have to have an edutaining. There's got to be some entertainment and along with the education. Those have got to be mixed for us, or it just doesn't work.
Okay. So then, while it may not be a very complete and yet concise process way that you're doing it, by default in your experiences, you are evaluating everything that you're doing for that edutainment factor.
Totally. The edutainment factor, if we probably could put a whole bunch of metrics underneath it, you would have the totality of the experience. We could probably get to a number, but it would have all these smaller metrics underneath it. Yeah, you could do that. Okay, I might have to do that. When can you get that done for me, Jim?
Checks in the mail. As long as the check's in the mail, I'll be good to go.
Yes, it's on the way. I'll send you a t-shirt, which by the way, we just launched a few days ago and people are freaking out on the merchandise area because we're using t-shirts that say book mama or book daddy or words are sexy, or this is our biggest one right now. This is people suck, date a book. The fact that they're going, I'm used to doing this online dating, but it's frustrating. I would much rather sit home on a Friday night. A lot of people would, and date a book and spend some time having a great read. So there are already people clamoring into our retail store. Who knows? Maybe that's where we make all of our money. We become a merch company instead of a tech company.
Well, it's an ecosystem, man. It's an ecosystem.
It is. Yes.
Okay. All right. So now I'm sitting here, and I'm, someone who is held responsible or in charge of, B2B marketing and sales. And I'm looking at, books and creating a book and all that as part of my plan and strategy. What should they be thinking?
Yeah, so I would almost take books out of the equation. Again, I think we said this at the top of your show. There are some people, they're just not going to be readers. They understand the concept, but if they're a B2B marketer, if they've got a B2B business, I think you think in terms of what's the uncommon thinking, the language that you use. How can I be non-traditional in whatever it is, whatever widget, whatever service I deliver? How could I become a discovery platform? How could I take all of these innovative things? Because here's exactly what happens. People have been doing things the same way for decades, and they only know what they know. And if their executive team, maybe it's one or two people, and they sit around and all they talk about is just the few things or moving some things around, but they really at the core are doing the same thing they've always done. I think you've got to get in there and really, like a bull in a china shop, you got to break things down. You got to start thinking, what would Mod Pizza do? What would Starbucks do? What would Zappos do? What would Amazon do? What would Bookstar PR do? Like, what are some crazy innovative companies doing that we can't do exactly that? We don't sell the same product. We're not in the same business. But man, could I learn from them? Could I learn from banking or insurance or funeral directors? What can I learn from all of these businesses that I could break the mold and do it differently for me? That's uncommon thinking. And I think that's where breakout businesses happen all the time. By the way, Jim, we are shocked that nobody ever took books and online dating and put them together. I'm shocked that hasn't existed. But now that we've got something out there, I freely think that we could do this with almost any product or any system. I really do believe that. So I hope there are people in your audience, there's some sparks right now, things are just all in their head going, oh my gosh, I could do something like that in my world. Then we've won. I love when I go to eat, drink, shop, stay, play, whatever it is in my personal life, I'm on the hunt for businesses that do stuff like that. And then you get me as a loyal customer, and I'll scream from the top of my lungs about how awesome you are. That's how a B2B marketer wins.
Jim Knight, always a blast to chat with you. Can you tell the B2B DM gang how they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, I would start, with the new concept, bookiecall.com. You could obviously go to bookstarpr.com. And if you just want to chat with me, and I'm pretty easy to get a hold of, start at Knight Speaker. That's my last name, KNIGHT speaker.com. You'll see everything that I sort of play around with on that site. And man, it's a pleasure, man. I really, really appreciate you having me on this show. It's great.
Jim Knight, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and we wish you the very best.
You got it. Rock on.
Thank you for joining us. Go now to join the B2B DM gang in the B2B Marketer LinkedIn group, where you can connect with other B2B DM disruptors and get access to our B2B DM cheat sheets, checklist, and guides. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, please help by going to iTunes to rate, review, and subscribe. And share the show on all of your digital platforms. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode. And always remember, you can automate your lead capture, but you must lure your lead.